All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. If you've been enjoying our content, please make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate all your support. We've got an ACC matchup here, a rivalry matchup, North Carolina at NC State. North Carolina has been a little up and down as of late. I mean, they lost to Miami a couple games ago, and they didn't look terrific against Pitt. They're obviously missing their best player in Caleb Wilson for probably the rest of the regular season. NC State has looked like they're trending upwards as of late. I mean, they also just lost to Miami and Louisville. They got blown out by Louisville. But before that, they were looking pretty good. So, Cody, I'm going to toss it over to you and talk about NC State and their keys to the game to get back in the win column here.
Yeah, they had an absolute meltdown in the last minute of the game against Miami. Fouled True Washington shooting a three, and that was all she wrote. I mean, they did enough to win up until the last minute, and obviously you got to close the game out. But, I mean, I've been, fairly encouraged from what I've seen from NC State in conference play. I think they're one of the most, they can be one of the most lethal offenses from a shot-making perspective in the country, really. I mean, they've shown that all year long. They're sixth nationally in three-point percentage. They take care of the ball at an elite level when they're shooting it 40% in conference play. So, I mean, if they're making shots, they can beat anybody in the country. But with that being said, I do think this is kind of a rough matchup for their offense. I know North Carolina doesn't have the top end version of their defense right now. Caleb Wilson is very important to what they do defensively. Having two rim protectors on the floor at all times and being a little bit more versatile, a little bit more switchable too is really key for Carolina. But I prefer NC State more against more aggressive defenses and more two on the ball defenses. And, this isn't really what North Carolina is. They're more of a drop coverage defense that forces, pick and roll creation. They limit spot up shooting. And that's kind of what NC State has lived off all year long. And, if Veesaar doesn't play, I think it could change. I mean, Carolina played a lot of drop against Pittsburgh. I think they played exclusively drop in that game with Zayden High and even a little bit with Jaron Stevenson as well. I'm not sure if that would, be the case in a matchup like this. You're a step up in class here against NC State. But if Veesaar plays, they're going to play drop and they're going to force Quadir Copeland into being a scorer as opposed to a playmaker. He's one of the best playmakers in the country, and he's shown that with his assist rate at this point in time. And, when teams send two at him, he's, his length and athleticism to, get around the high hedge. And, he can just reach around a defender and make a pass kind of out of nowhere. He creates open looks for this NC State offense, at a very elite level. 44% assist rate, I believe. Turns it over a little bit, but ultimately you can live with that when he's creating looks like he does. But in this matchup, I think he's going to turn more into that mid-range scorer. He's going to have to attack Veesaar a little bit at the rim, maybe get him in foul trouble. So in this game, I do think Quadir Copeland's going to have to be great against the drop coverage and potentially force Carolina to switch up coverages. And then that creates some other things for guys like McNeil and Darian Williams. I think this is kind of a rough matchup for Darian Williams' primary scoring, but getting matched up with Jaron Stevenson. Williams has really struggled with length and athleticism. He's a 33% shooter inside the arc in conference play this season. So, it's just kind of that lack of athleticism and length and burst to get over the top of defenders. And I think Jaron Stevenson's kind of a rough matchup for him. But so I do think Quadir Copeland's really the X factor on the offensive end. I think NC State has paths in off-ball actions with McNeil, Matt Abel, and then other shooters across the board for this NC State team. I think McNeil is going to have to knock down some shots in this game. It may not be from spot up, but it could come from, Will Wade scheming up something to run him off screens consistently, because I don't think they have great defenders for him unless they have Trimble kind of follow him around, which I think is a real possibility in this game. So, yeah, I do think that's another avenue. On the defensive end, it's a little bit different because we don't really know what we're getting from Carolina against a high quality defense, against Pittsburgh. They've kind of been spiraling throughout conference play throughout the year. They've dealt with a ton of injuries, and they play through Caleb Wilson a lot. But I do think this is a game where Carolina is going to play through Veesaar quite a bit through the post. They need to find a way to contain him. They don't have a great like individual matchup for him, but NC State will send two at the post quite often. Maybe force him to making some bad decisions. I know he's a solid passer for his position, and they have some viable shooters that can knock it down. A little bit inconsistent, but ultimately I think containing Veesaar in the post and just limit his rim attempts, I think will be really big in this game. They need to limit second chances as well. They've been really bad on the defensive glass in league play. 15th in the ACC in defensive rebound rate. The UNC is shorthanded though in this game. Wilson's one of their better offensive rebounders, so maybe that can soften the blow there. And then one final thing would be force UNC's guards into isolation situations. They're really not good in isolation situations, and NC State is like one of the best isolation forcing defenses in the country. They're in the 99th percentile in ISO rate forced. North Carolina 6th percentile in isolation efficiency. So, force these guys to create off the bounce. You're going to need to, guard a little bit in space there. Like the more help you send against this Carolina defense tomorrow night, I think the worse it is for you. So be able to guard in space and isolation. And I think you could be in a good spot defensively.
Yeah, NC State is actually the pretty heavy favorite here. The line's set at 7.5. I mean, it is a home game for them. And I think Wilson being out hurts UNC a little bit. But with Wilson being out, what does North Carolina have to do to come into NC State and get a win here?
Yeah, I mean, defensively, I think first off, it's limit the 3-point line, and I think you're set up fairly well to do so. I think the defensive scheme sets up well with drop coverage and they stay connected to shooters. They had a stretch where they were extremely unlucky with, their 3-point defense, particularly that West Coast trip that they lost to Cal and Stanford. And they're still giving up 40% from three in league play, but they have they have given up a pretty low unguarded 3-point percentage, but just all of them are going in. So I do attribute that to being a bit unlucky. And like I said, I like the Stevenson matchup against Darian Williams. Take away his creation, turn him into an inefficient scorer, which I think you can in this game. And again, turning Quadir Copeland into a scorer, turn those two guys into non-playmakers, and I think you're set up very well defensively, which, like I said, I think that's very viable. I do think Veesaar needs to stay out of foul trouble. Like if Quadir Copeland continuously attacks him, gets downhill against that drop, and Veesaar picks up a couple quick ones, I don't love Zayden High in this game personally. He's, he looked okay against Pittsburgh, but playing 20 plus minutes in this game against truly quality competition on the road, I don't really think is a great outlook here. The bench is pretty thin without Caleb Wilson. It was kind of a concern coming into the season, the front court depth, and it gets hurt when your best player is out. So Veesaar needs to stay on the floor if healthy. I'm assuming he's going to go. The interview I saw with Hubert Davis was fairly encouraging. They said they were more concerned with the sickness than his ankle injury. So I think that's a good thing. I'm not 100% sure. I would assume that's good. Hopefully he's over the sickness by now. But so I think he'll ultimately be okay. And on the offensive end, I think get out and run as often as possible. NC State gives up a pretty high transition rate. Carolina offenses always want to run, data back to the Dean Smith days, and they want to run. Roy Williams wanted to run. Hubert Davis has taken that over. They want to run. They're in the 74th percentile in transition rate. And, NC State will run their 3-quarter court press quite often. They'll pick up full court as well. North Carolina is elite against press. They're in the 94th percentile against full court press this season. So I kind of like the two-way matchup for North Carolina. It's just a matter of, do they have enough? They've played so much through Caleb Wilson that, can they adjust in game number 2 without him? In that first game that you're missing one of your star players, you usually have a lot of guys, rally around that and step up, especially in a home game. Now you're going on the road in that second game. Do those role players that played pretty well against Pittsburgh, do they regress a little bit? So that's kind of what it comes down to for me. And then I guess one final thing would just be, take advantage of the size mismatch with Veesaar on the offensive end. Get on the glass a little bit. The NC State's a little bit susceptible. And if they kind of crowd Veesaar in the post, Veesaar needs to make smart decisions with the ball, find shooters consistently, and hopefully those guys can knock him down.
Yeah, Veesaar, I think, is really going to be the X factor here for North Carolina if they want to win this game. Cody, who are you picking in this matchup? Who do you like to win this one?
Yeah, I've been pretty back and forth on this one. Actually, I view it as a pretty solid two-way matchup for North Carolina, but NC State, I think they really need this game after those two losses, and I think their shot making at home is ultimately just going to be a little bit too much. Like, I feel like this is a game that I think comes down to the final possession. Like, I know you've called a buzzer beater on here before. I think we could see a buzzer beater from Paul McNeil. I think that's a very, very likely thing, a 25, 26 footer to win it. That wouldn't shock me at all, but I have NC State winning this game 79-77. I think their shot making just leads the way.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I love a buzzer beater call anytime it's called. I have it going a little differently. I think North Carolina gets up and down, and I think Veesaar is just too much, honestly, on the inside. So I'm picking North Carolina 83-77, actually. Anything else to add here, Cody?
Yeah, well, as we record, it actually popped up that Veesaar is officially questionable, and it seems like he's iffy. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what's going on here. So hopefully we didn't make this video for no reason.
Yeah, I'm sticking with my guns here. I'm sticking with my guns.
I think he's going to play.
I think he plays. If he doesn't, then I like NC State here. But if he does, North Carolina, 83-77. All right, let's wrap it up here. As always, thank you for listening to the Manly Hoops podcast.